Hi, my presentation will cover topics about how societies deal and are capable of producing antientropic effects. Actually, that's one of their main characteristics. They use tools, be they technical tools like technology, machines, any kind of artifact that's a product of the human intellect, and also organizational tools based on our capability of getting together and setting up methods of doing things, be them managing societies or actually making production and the way we build stuff more effective and efficient. So, and that mainly covers an anti-entropic capability, a capability of organize, concentrate, and manipulate energy, or that is which for this presentation would be the capability of doing work of having a discernible effect on reality for our own interests, for our own purposes. This is not something exactly or exclusively human, so to speak. Well, it is exactly human, but it's not. But it's far from exclusive. Actually, that's the diminishing of energy, the of entropy, the organization of matter, is constant since the universe came to be. And but that's a constant that's produced both by social, as I said at the opening, but by natural forces. When a planet comes together, when a solar system, that's a reduction of entropy. Organization is happening. Energy and matter are being organized in specific patterns, and that also happens when there's life. There's further organization. There's further manipulation of energy. There's further change in this because these new forms of life are affecting reality in such a manner that they can achieve their purpose, which is, well, staying alive. And the history of life could be maybe understood as a further enhancements in this process in a competitive manner, such as achieving further and further capabilities in this regard. So that that eventually reaches us, our history. At the stage that you see this last picture, that's still, well, there is a society, but it's in a very precarious stage. So it's not as if it's one of a factor to the relevant factor to the point that I would call it a social phase. That might be it starts, but it really comes together with the Neolithic revolution when we start when we transition from hunter gatherers to agrarian societies, and therefore staying a sedentary, exploiting the nature in a sedentary manner, and managing further and further extraction of energy and its organization, and achieving new levels of efficiency through the specialization of work, through achieving technical knowledge on how to do things better, by using commerce to allow this specialization, allowing increasing increasingly higher degrees of interdependency to come to be in our society. Therefore, you can see that there is a sequence to these things. The universe organizes itself, its elements come together and produce further reactions, not with a purpose, that's just how things are. But this eventually creates things, life, that do it with a purpose, that do it to a very important, a specific person is important for themselves, which is staying alive. And that, to, to one degree or another, has produced intelligence for the cognitive abilities that allow some beings to to develop their own ways, to not be constrained by their inherent physical capabilities, and further use the environment or organize themselves in such a way as to better use the environment and develop tools, etc. Humans are not the only ones that could do that. You can see this kind of behavior nowadays from elephants to primates, and there's no reason to think that hasn't happened before. Probably not to the degree that we, at least on this planet, probably not to the degree that we have seen our species achieve, but we can rule out that in some other places of the universe, we have not only we have not some societies have not come to be and may have achieved parity with us technologically wise, and probably surpassed us. But eventually, the degree of complexity of these social organizations achieve something else, achieve the creation of culture, certain degree of shared identity of the community, which which may, if it manages to survive and increase its numbers, try to formalize this to set up how things are going to really work when we talk and operate with each other, which are institutions, creating a society in which any economy operates. An economy is an immersive process that is constrained, is contingent on all these factors. And we can see this by these culture institutions, therefore, will be antientropic organizational factors, organizational and concentration capabilities. You can concentrate matter, diminish entropy through techniques, through the technical means, of course, so steam engine, or even a bonfire. But well, actually, bonfire is not a very good example. But but a steam engine might be. But you can do that by simply getting together and getting together and agreeing on how things are going to work and who we are and who am I going to work together with and who am I not and is our purpose. These are actually also antientropic capabilities. They may work at a social level, but they are not less effective for it. But then these capabilities were further enhanced with the scientific and industrial revolution. When we managed to until then, we had basically the energetic means, that is the amount of stuff we could do with our environment was basically restricted to the amount of energy we got from the sun. That's how much. That's how the larger majority of our energy came. That's where it came from. So when we managed to use sources of energy that were the product of hundreds of millions of years of accumulated organic matter beneath the soil, we could further expand this energetic frontier. And with the presence of the scientific revolution, we managed to develop better and better ways of doing so. And when we managed to achieve this, we could produce better instruments and more sophisticated instruments, and or more of them, and therefore include more people in this process, creating a better scientific process. And this created a feedback loop that generated the world as we see it today. So we see that this was not the last, but not the last step in any of this great narrative that energetic and or antientropic narrative, historical narrative that I am showing. But the last for us, at least, a less paradigmatic shift in that regard. And we can see this change by looking at how we got the energy for our useful work, or useful energy, or prime movers that actually got stuff done in our society. And you can see that the overall, well, until the beginning of the 19th century, the amount of energy came from people and animals, therefore from food indirectly, it was a far bigger than any other way of doing so. But in 100 years, you see a change that that is unparalleled, not only 3,900 years before, but as far as we know, in the history of this planet. And even 50 years later, this again changed, with another main prime mover coming to dominate the way we do stuff. But that's not something, a change only in kind, is also in scale, because as you can see here, in the left side, you see how which kind of sources we used to do stuff, to produce work, and from that to make anything happen. And that's in logarithmic scale, so you can see that each height is 10 times bigger than the lower one. So that's in millions of tons of oil equivalent. So we went in the 1700s, in the beginning of the 18th century, from, let's say, maybe 300 or something millions of tons to over 10,000 nowadays, more than 30 times bigger, larger amount. But that was only in fossil fuel sources. That was not in biomass. Biomass stayed relatively, the organic aspect of this stayed relatively stable. Of course, it expanded a lot, but not to the degree of the fossil fuels. And on the right side, you can see the amount of energy per capita that the human beings now have available to them at any time. So, and this increase tremendously, maybe 25 times in the same amount of time. So the average human being can do 20 times more work, or its societies on average now can do 25 times more work than they used to be able to do per person. Therefore, energy being, for our purposes, the ability to produce, the ability to make stuff happen, to manipulate reality in such a way as to conform to your will. This necessarily has an economic component, an economic component and consequence. This energy density diversity produce what is called the great economic diversity, in which some societies, those in which these advancements uh, manage to achieve this new degree of new degrees of economic activity, while other organic societies stayed around the same. Where these first groups being some countries of Europe, not whole of Europe, but some at the start at least, but some countries in Europe, and some of its colonies, actually the very small minority of its colonies, managed to make you to not only to develop but become a part of this process, while the rest of the world didn't um, it didn't fall back. It stayed where it was. It didn't became there wasn't an economic decadence or an economic um, loss compared to what they were before. It will in absolute measurements, it was a comparative shock. Before that, as you may see on this data, with this data, every society, High China stands for the more advanced parts of China, okay? The Yangtze Valley, Delta, and when you compare with the more advanced societies that were present in Europe until the beginning of the 19th century, you see that none has achieved more than around $900 per year. That's a unit here. $900 per year as GDP per capita. That's something that Goldstone therefore theorized might be Jack Goldstone theorized that might be the overall organic ceiling, organic economic ceiling of human activity. But this change and this produce different economic and technological paradigms. A new one, at least, and that's the one we are currently at. So there's a sequential chain of events that result in our present civilization. There are natural phases, and there are social phases, social technological phases. Each one further enhancing our anti-entropic capabilities, our ability to organize, concentrate, organize, and manipulate matter. And each one of these set up a new standard of a new standard in energy concentration and in energy concentration, organization, manipulation. There's Given that this is something that has been happening for millions of years, there's no reason to think that this overarching imperative would change in any time in the future. Of course, there is the heat death of the universe and all that, but not too gloomy about it. That's so far. That's so far distant from our temporal horizons of our not only from an individual standpoint, but from our societies, our species, that we can maybe ignore it a bit. Uh, and but technological diversities, when possible, the social and technological component of this narrative, when they happen, when they're possible, when they happen, they bring with them gaps between the capabilities of different societies to organize and change their natural and social environment. The same as an animal is much more capable of changing its environment than a bacteria. It's at least from a complexity standpoint, it's the same for the overall complexity levels of societies at different technological and economic levels. And so, so every step of the way, you can change the environment to your will from a social and economic standpoint without really being very concerned by what your lessers are able to do about it. So what we can conclude is that there's an observable increase in energy accumulated manipulation throughout all of natural and social history. This paradigm shifts enhance anti-entropic capabilities to orders of magnitude greater than any previous one. So more advanced societies, just like uh, just like an ant is it's so far beyond the bacteria that they can't even think about each other, but we can look at the ants with our increased intelligence, and we can be unconcerned. Not maybe given recent events, not being solely concerned about what the bacteria does, but that's overall in our day-to-day lives. That's how things more or less are. And so more advanced societies, given the precedent that the Industrial Revolution set up, has shown to us, has established. We Any more advanced societies than we are will probably have such ways and means to manipulate their reality in that we can't really comprehend, or maybe we can comprehend, but control. I wouldn't bet on that. Uh, so we not only with our technology, with our knowledge, manage to achieve a degree of capabilities that would only begin to be comparable to the gods of our ancestors. We have control over the atom. We fly. We move thousands of miles in a day. We manage to organize and move an amount of products and to sustain a society that is far beyond that was far beyond their comprehension. In society terms, people 1,000 years ago, or maybe even less, like 1,500 years ago, are basically societal ends to our society. And as Arthur C. Clarke stated, this degree would be far beyond our control because any any sufficiently advanced technology is basically indistinguishable from magic. Okay, we can discuss what sufficiently advanced means for and what it means for each situation, but that's not that's a principle that has shown to be very relevant to our society. And this is a very relevant consideration because this brings with itself new capabilities, yes, but also big risks that we now face that our ancestors couldn't even consider, but like climate change, like nuclear warfare and mutually assured destruction. And that's not going to get anything any lighter. These are not any more any topic in that regard with using future technology, any kind of developments in that regard with future technology. It's not going to get easier to deal with or less dangerous. And we have to think how we're going to teach that because that's not in human nature to consider. It's not in our nature nowadays, barely in our nature nowadays to consider. And we are dealing with stuff that's going to be a fraction that has a fraction of the capabilities, both for constructive use but also for destructive use, and with unforeseen consequences that our descendants are gonna have to deal with, and we have to prepare them. Thank you. That's it. Pronto, Daniel.